My name is Eitan Chatayat, and welcome to I'm That Podcast, where I get to talk to some pretty incredible people. Some are friends and colleagues, some are clients, and some are people I haven't even met yet. On I'm That, we'll hear from them about who they are, what they do and why, stuff they love or hate, mistakes they've made, victories they've had. They're all known for something, but by the time we're through, the hope is they'll have revealed some things we didn't know about them. Our talk may be deep, profound, funny, who knows really. One thing for sure, it'll be interesting and honest. So if you're up for that, thank you for joining me on I'm That, and here we go. Ronny Vance, former president of Geffen Music and Interscope Music, has over 40 years of experience in the music industry. The artists and writers he has signed in that time have cumulative sales of over 200 million records. Built upon his uncanny knack for spotting songwriting talent and superstar artists in all music genres, each of his endeavors has enjoyed unprecedented achievement. Over the course of this career, Vance has been responsible for the signings of Tupac, New Edition, Stephen Sondheim, Bruce Hornsby and Gwen Stefani of No Doubt, and for the placement of such notable songs as Maniac, New Attitude, and Eric Clapton's two-time 1998 Grammy-winning song Change the World, which I love, amongst so many others. He's also the president of MyPart, a company that serves creators, owners, and representatives of songs, as well as anyone looking for songs to cut or license through AI-powered song matching, an incredible company. He lives in Jerusalem, in the heart of the old city, with his wife and son. And here he is.
What's doing?
How you doing? How was your day?
Good. Actually, really, I should really be most grateful. I was, when I reached out to you about this project, musical project, I've been really depressed because the guy that I started it with years ago, on and off and on and off and off, on and off, about 6 months ago, he said, I didn't want to do it anymore. And I really was so sunk over that. And I've been reaching out to the top guys in Israel. They're all unbelievably talented, but whatever they had submitted so far was somewhat just not right. Not great, but just not right. And sometimes, when you're not a musician, I can play, but I'm not a musician, right? And you're not an engineer, it's like you're just like a guy that, it's like that's like what? More of an executive music person, etc. So sometimes it's difficult to articulate, to really try to tell somebody who's worked their whole life and developed major skills that something that they've given you isn't right. It's not fair. So I'm very careful. I'm very sensitive to where these guys are at. Make a long story short, you asked me about my day.
I did.
I woke up in the morning and the other guy, the original guy, had returned an email that I sent a couple of days ago saying that he'd be happy to meet with me.
Mm.
So I'm seeing him tomorrow.
Mm.
I don't want to give it too much, but I'm pretty sure that we just, we didn't communicate properly. And, he left and I didn't know why. And I got mad. And I think tomorrow we're going to figure it out. And I think we're going to get back to it. I hope.
I think since we're talking about it, I think what might be good is for you to explain what this personal project actually is.
Okay. I think I don't think too much. I didn't tell you too much. Since I was a little kid, we had a housekeeper. Maybe it sounded like we weren't rich. That's for sure. But something about my dad was so crazy about my mom, really crazy about her, that the one thing that he always wanted to make sure is that she had help. So I'm born in 53, I'm going to be 70. And, so by the time I was born, they had help. And this woman was with me, what do you call it? African American, black, and whatever. She was with me until I moved out of the house at about 17, 18. And she didn't write very well or read very well. And it was in New York. It was freezing winters. I remember going into her bedroom and I would sit on the radiator in there, and she'd have on an old-fashioned tube radio, and she'd have on a gospel station that she'd listen to, I guess, until she went to bed. And I just heard that music ever since that I was a little kid, and it meant so much to me. And so now I'd always wanted to try and make a record like that for Jews. Now, pointing out, though, that when I say make it for Jews, it's for everyone, except Jews aren't interested in a gospel, certainly an inspirational record that has anything to do with anything other than God, Kadosh Baruch Hu, but certainly not Jesus or any of that kind of stuff. And about 5 or 6 years ago, when Rabbi Steinsaltz, who wrote a book called The 13-Petaled Rose and thousands of other books, but I think that was like a hit, The 13-Petaled Rose. I used to see him every Shabbat, and I asked him one Saturday morning if it would be okay if I would get a blessing to make a record like a gospel inspirational type of a record. And he looked at me and he said, "You must make that record." And it's been difficult to make it, but I'm determined to get somewhere with it, which we have. You know, we have some tracks and we have some great singers. I think, as I told you, Wednesday night I'm going to Haifa to there's a gospel event that has to do with I think Anthony Jackson. I forgot the artist's name. It's not even relevant necessarily. There's an gospel artist from America that's here that is performing in Haifa with local Israeli gospel groups, some from Dimona and some from other places. And so, yeah, that's some of the pieces of the current puzzle, as you know, and how we met is because you saw my boss, Matan, giving a speech at the, I guess, some sort of a pitch to investors.
Yeah, he was speaking at the AI conference, and I was very impressed with what you guys are doing. And I spoke to him, and then we had a meeting, and you were there, and then I guess we kind of hit it off.
Yeah, we definitely hit it off. And of course, then we have the girls from the Revolution and from that crowd in common, who I haven't seen. You know, I mean, they wouldn't. You know, I'm sure if they saw me, they'd get scared today.
Because of that big shaggy beard of yours. And I think Suzanne and Wendy would get a kick out of it.
Yeah, you know, who was it that we had a meeting? You know, Matan and I have meetings on this Zoom all the time, and so every now and then it's with people I haven't seen in 20, 30, 40 years. And you know, and then the camera goes, you know, and there I am. But they've already, everybody does some kind of due diligence. You know, they check you out before they actually meet with you. So the people have seen what I look like.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I know you as who you are right now, but who you are right now is a little different to where you've come from, I guess, you know, in terms of like what you do every day. And I wanted to ask you a question because you started talking about your helper and how she turned you on to gospel. But that's music. And I guess that's the one question that I wanted to ask you right from the get-go. But before I do, there's always a question that I ask on the podcast, and it's usually the first question that I ask. And it's really a request to complete the sentence. And so I'm just going to ask you the question, and you can take your time with it. Ronnie Vance. I'm that.
Really? Do you do this all the time?
Oh, yeah.
Hmm. Oh God, I don't know how to answer that. I mean, I'm that kid that that grew up as a young guy in New York, and I started to tell you about the helper, and I grew up in sitting in her bedroom. Oh, I started to say, she didn't read and write very well, so I would sit there as a little kid. I would write all of her Christmas cards and fill out all the envelopes and I was, and she always just say, Ronald, I raised you from a baby. And so that's a profound, I'll show you a picture if I can find it, of she and I when I was 13.
It was nice the way you started. Like, I'm that kid in New York. Yeah, you grew up in New York.
I mean, now is an incredible, we have to look it up. Maybe you can look it up. I'd like to get it right as opposed to paraphrase. But David Bowie, who was, out of this world as a songwriter and musician, everything else that he did. But I think he passed about 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, something like that.
There's a quote. It's easy enough to find in the internet. There's a quote where he said that who he is now, at that point, he was in his late 60s, is really, he felt that that's who he always was, or that he's finally the guy that he always wanted to be. Something, again, well, we must find the quote, but it was
Sure,
just,
but I think what you're saying though is
it just was wonderful. What a wonderful feeling about, it was either whoever, if I took acid in 1968 or if I, was snorted something, whatever and whatever insanity that you go through in your 20s and 30s. And then I'll do it this way. I'll tell you a quick story. I met Matan 5 years ago. Up until then, I was, learning at the yeshivot that are here in Jerusalem and taking care of my son, who was still kind of getting little, but coming more of age. And Matan was telling me about AI and how it's going to affect the music, et cetera, et cetera. And I had absolutely no interest in what he was doing, but I offered to help him for nothing. To make a long story short, he raised money. He started a company. He hired me. I went to work there. And I guess he must have told his main investor, I got this guy, Ronny Vance. He lives in Jerusalem. He used to run Geffen and Interscope and worked for Universal. And he had all these jobs. And I'm bringing him in. So this guy who's obviously a bazillionaire who invested, millions of dollars into the company. And so one day I'm at the office and he has his office, down the hall, and there's lots of these startups on the wing there. And I guess he wants to check me out. Or someone said, Ronnie's going to be here today. So he walks in. Now, again, we're sitting in a room. This is in the very beginning of the company. So there were now there's like 15 of us, but at that time there was like maybe 4. And he walks in, and everybody in there is 25, 27, 30, and then there's me. So he walks into the office and he says, what's, like, who are you? Who are you? Like, what's your story? There's no one there's no one around those startup offices and that scene over there that's over 450, whatever. I don't know that's got one of these. And so he wanted to know, like, like, what happened to you is basically what he wants to know. Here you are, you're running these companies in California. And now you're here in Israel, living in the old city of Jerusalem. Well, I didn't really, rehearse anything, and I didn't know what to say to him. So I just said, I said, what can I tell you? I said, one day you somehow, if you're lucky, you discover that there's a God in the world, and that it's probably a good idea to pay attention to that and to maybe do something about that discovery that you've made. Again, as I said, it's not rehearsed. It just was the truth at that moment, and so, and that's how it's kind of been, it's a work in progress. Anybody who says they're a Baal Tshuva or that they're this or that, good luck. I mean, it's an effort and it's a work in progress kind of thing. And anybody who says anything that they could say, anybody could say whatever they want, obviously. But for me, it was on one level, hitting the jackpot because it got me here. And we've been here for 25 years almost, with a 4-year interruption when we had to go back to Boston. But I never looked back once, never for a second. Oh, don't you want to go back to L.A.? No, I said, no, not for a second. Not for a second.
How did you get into music?
Well, my oldest brother was a bit of a pop star he was a pop star in the 60s.
Huh.
He was in a group called Jay and the Americans, and Jay and the Americans had a lot of hit records. And even when the Beatles came to America in 1964, they did a bunch of gigs, and Jay and the Americans opened for them on one of those jobs in Washington, D.C. Yeah, I mean, it was in the house. It was in the house, and it certainly was something that, that I guess I wanted a piece of, and or I wanted a part of, or something. I don't know what I wanted, but I thought it was pretty cool. And what can I say? There was also, during his run of having hits, he was trying to, make it as a record producer also, or trying to find artists to work with. And he actually found Donald Fagen and Walter Becker, who became Steely Dan. And so I was around, the bar was very, very high for me as a kid, because those guys were just out of this world songwriters. And so, having been around, the bar was raised so high as a kid for me that when I finally, scored a job, that I think it only helped me do my job as good as I did it pretty well over the years. And so yeah, I did I answer it? Not exactly.
Kind of. I mean, what is it that you did? I mean, I know that, people who know you as a very, very successful, I guess, music executive.
Yeah.
But what is that for people who don't know what a music executive is? And in the intro to the podcast, we talk about, the fact that you signed incredible musicians. I mean, from Tupac to Bruce Hornsby and Gwen Stefani of No Doubt. I'm on your website right now, and I'm seeing all sorts of artists flash in front of my eyes, from SWV to Rod Stewart to Patti LaBelle to Brenda Russell.
So just to point out, and it's true. Yes, Tupac, Gwen Stefani, and I did sign and work with them as songwriters before they became gigantic stars. Hornsby as well, but for the most part, I don't really know Patti LaBelle or Eric Clapton or a lot of the other people that are on my website. However, writers that we had under contract wrote songs for all of those people, which is why they're on my website. Yeah. So
just to say that you signed Tupac, I mean, that's incredible. So, which I want to get to, but so when I was saying that you're a music executive, how did you get into that stratosphere of, that level of bringing in those quality people? I mean, how did that happen?
Well, it's like step by step by step. In the beginning, I made a lot of mistakes. I would sign people that, maybe didn't have hits right away. For instance, even Hornsby. I signed Hornsby as a songwriter in 1979. but he didn't have his first hit until 1985. So, I mean, I was so early on that one. And most of the songs that he wrote when I signed him, none of them wound up on Bruce Hornsby records. He just matured and opened a door. I was already gone from the company that I signed him to. And he really worked so hard and opened the door until he started to, figure out what his inner voice was, because up until that point, I think he was just throwing anything he could at the wall to see what would stick, and nothing was really sticking. So sometimes, timing is so critical. In the case of Bruce Hornsby, even though I think he's be the first to say, I got my first break when Ronnie Vance signed me, but we didn't have success really together. So when I left that company, which was called 20th Century Fox, I went to Warner Brothers, and I actually signed a writer named Michael Sembello, who,
Maniac.
yeah, but as a kid, he was a stone cold genius. He was Stevie Wonder's guitar player. You can't be in a room with Stevie Wonder unless you're the best in the world. Now, people would probably jump all over me, but I would say that Michael Sembello was as good as anybody out there as a guitar player. And as a songwriter, he was pretty damn good. We had songs that were recorded by everybody, but the giant one was the song that Michael wrote for the Flash Dance. It's a
She's a
long story.
maniac, maniac.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
when he wrote that, he didn't write it really for a movie. He was writing a song. He was crazy. He was writing a song about a maniac that was a serial killer. And, but it was such a great vibe and great chorus that when I played it for the executive over at Paramount Pictures, he said, "Do you think that they would change the lyric and try to make it work for this?" And of course they wrote, "She's a maniac on the floor. She's dancing like it's never done before," or whatever it is. And so that, and originally they were, Rod Stewart was slated to record the song, and he pulled out at the last minute, and there was no time left. So someone said, "Who's singing the demo?" And they said, the guy that wrote it, Sembello. They said, "Fine, put him on there."
Did he ever, like, beyond that, did he ever have any success beyond that? Because, I mean, that song, everyone knows that song, but, like, not many people know the artist.
Yeah, no, not really, not really. He made a couple of more records, and but nothing like that. No, nothing like that.
And you mentioned Rod Stewart. I'm a huge Rod Stewart fan. I mean, I love all of his stuff.
Yeah.
Have you worked with him before, or?
Well, again, I'm trying to remember that I don't think I ever met Rod Stewart, but yes, I mean, another writer that I had under contract was Mark Jordan. He made several albums as an artist. He's a Canadian artist. He made 2 or 3 albums for Warner Brothers, and then several for BMG and some independent records. Never really happened as an artist, though. He's a big star in Canada. But he wrote a song called "Rhythm of My Heart" while he was under contract to me, which became a #1 record for Rod Stewart.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you see, from the outside, all these names. I mean, I'm a huge Tupac fan. I mean, I've been listening to Tupac for forever. So I'm dying to ask you about what that story is and how.
Yeah, that's not a very interesting story. I don't want to disappoint you and your listeners, but it's really not. However, what really happened was that I had just become the head. Actually, it wasn't just. It was I was already there a year or two. I was running music publishing at Interscope, and Tom Wally, who was a spectacular, brilliant A&R guy, who signed the Wallflowers and Tupac, and just so many hits. And he called me up and he said, "Listen, you should come down to my office. I want you to hear somebody I'm signing." And he played me a couple of tracks, and he said, so you should try to get this guy. And I did. And I got lucky. It was, I didn't have a real relationship with Tupac until the day that I gave him a check for a couple of $100,000. That was a lot of money in 1994. But I took a shot, I took a gamble, and and it was.
Was that like first album was Brenda's Got a Baby, right? That was his first hit?
Yeah, pretty sure.
Yeah, I think so. What was he like? I mean, did you get to know him a little bit?
But no, really not. What's fascinating, even with my son who's 19, so, when he started to come of age at 13, 14, and he started to figure out like what his dad did, before at a different, part of his life, that was the thing that he thought was cool. Like you do. You think like the Tupac thing is cool, but the Tupac thing for me, quite honestly, was what was was more of a deal.
Sure.
Wasn't a passion thing. I loved what I heard, and I tried to get it, and I got it. But it wasn't like finding Cimbello and working with Cimbello and finding Hornsby and working with Hornsby and working with Brenda and the guy who wrote Change the World for
Eric Clapton.
Yeah,
Wasn't that Babyface?
No, Babyface produced the record.
Oh, he produced that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the song was co-written by my writer Tommy Sims, who was a gospel artist out of Nashville.
Incredible song. Incredible song.
And working with him was a joy, and and he just I could really dig in there, and I wound up getting him a record deal at Universal. There's one Tommy Sims album that's actually very good, but I don't think anybody is aware of it.
You touched on something right now, which was you started talking about what you loved. What did you love about what you did when you loved it? What was it that you loved? Was it like working with these artists and nurturing them or building that relationship with them? It certainly wasn't. I mean, I'm sure like it sounds very rock and roll, making those deals on the outside. It's like when people tell me, what was it like working with Apple? What was it like working with Facebook? What was it like working with YouTube? I mean, on the outside looking in, it always seems very glamorous and very sexy, and many times it isn't. So I imagine that's the case with you as well. But what was the thing for you when you were doing what you were doing and you were good at it? What was the thing that you loved? Like the thing that you loved the most?
The music.
What does that mean?
Yeah, there's something that happens, I think, to all of us, and it definitely happened to me. There's such a privilege to be around talent, especially not only the talent and the music, but especially when these people are, menschendick, when they're quality people, and to be part of the process of wherever it's going. You see, the Tupac thing and even the Gwen Stefani thing, these were records that were already pretty much in the can, as they say. These were records that were already done. I heard it and I jumped in, and I made an investment in stuff like that. But for the most part, most of the people that I would work with were people that were, bashing it out every day in their home studio. Ronny would call and say, I need a song for Madonna. I need a song for Clapton. I need a song for this new R&B group. I need a song for this commercial. I need a song for a movie. And it's like, it's always happening. It's a constant, drill and grill. And it's in such a great feeling when someone actually nails it. And it's like, holy shit. This is just unbelievable, this piece of music, and you're part of it. I mean, some of my favorite things that I was involved with, you'll never know. I mean, you want a quick story?
Many stories. That's why we're here.
Yeah. So, one of my writers was a guy named Matthew Wilder. Matthew Wilder had a gigantic hit of his own called Break My Stride. I don't know if it was a hit in Israel, but it was a worldwide hit. Ain't nothing gonna break my stride. song. You know it, yeah?
Everyone knows that song.
Okay.
Da-da-da-da-da. Yeah.
So that's Matthew Wilder, and he was under contract to me, and I worked with him every day, for years. And one day when I was on a business trip in the early '90s to New York, I get a call from one of the top guys, Frank Military, a famous music publisher who was Frank Sinatra's go-to. Frank Sinatra would only listen to songs that came through Frank Military. So if you wanted to get a song to Frank Sinatra, you had to go through Frank. And Frank called me one day and he said, Ronnie, he said, Sammy Cahn is driving me nuts. Now, Sammy Cahn wrote more hits than the Beatles. Let It Snow, Let It Snow, Let It Snow. I mean, after you look through through his discography, it's frightening how many hits he had. And in the early '90s, he was probably at that time already, shy of 70 or something. But so Frank calls me and he says, Ronnie, he says, Sammy's driving me nuts. See what you could do. Maybe one of your guys will work with him. So I called Matthew and I said, Sammy Cahn. And he said, he said, sure, I'll do something with him. And they wrote two songs together. One, I don't remember. I don't even know if I could find it. And the other one was a song called How Fast Forever Goes. Now, it was recorded 3 times that I know of. And the first version of it was recorded by a kid named Ramon Carter on Warner Brothers Records. And it was Quincy Jones who brought Ramon to Warner's through my friend Russ Titleman, who, of course, produced Tears in Heaven and produced How Sweet It Is by James Taylor and all the Randy Newman classics and Winwood and etc. And he heard the song that Matthew wrote with Sammy Cahn called How Fast Forever Goes. And the vocalist on the demo was this kid, Ramon Carter. I put all of these pieces together. And then, of course, as I said, Warner signed Ramon. The record was not successful. The record really sort of missed really capturing the beauty of what was there. But, people like to hear a success story. So, I mean, there's thank God there was enough of those. But moments like that, where you sort of cross breeding generations from Sammy to Matthew and Quincy gets involved and Russ Titleman is involved. And these are the greatest guys in the world, the greatest guys in the business. And I'm somewhere in the middle of the whole thing. That's a thrill. That's a thrill.
You stopped at some stage. How come?
You mean working?
Yeah, I mean, you left the music industry, didn't you?
Well, I guess
Did you retire? You just okay.
Not really, not in the traditional sense. I still had a couple of writers that I looked after, but it was hard to phone it all in. But there were 2 writers that I was looking after, and one of them was a guy named Paul Gordon, who I had hits with in the old days, and he wrote a musical called Daddy Longlegs that got made on an off-Broadway production. Did not go the distance, but he had also been nominated for a Tony Award for his music called Jane Eyre. It's based on Charlotte Bronte, I think. Yeah. So no, I didn't retire in the traditional sense, but I met my wife, and I met some rabbis, and I like the story I told the investor. It's like all of a sudden it's like there's a God in the world, and you want to do something about that.
Well, you don't come from a religious background, do you?
Oh, no, I don't. My dad liked to make sure that we had a Passover Seder, very American, very predictable and traditional. But he always wanted to make sure we had a Passover Seder. And he also wanted to make sure that we went to the temple on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, of course.
You live in the old city. I mean, I've been to your house, to your home, which is just beautiful and warm. And, this is an audio podcast, so people won't see where you're sitting.
The truth is that, it's home. So it's hard to, my son was born in, he's actually born in Boston, but he came back here as a little baby, and and he only knows this place, and he's really Israeli, and we talk about maybe moving, and it can be quite a test sometimes, especially before the COVID. The amount of tourists, it's like Jewish Disneyland here. So the amount of people coming through, it's like just to get in your car and be able to get out of here. Sometimes it can be murder. Whatever. It's silly stuff. You're asking me what's it like living here. Again, it's sort of like when we came to Israel. To me, I didn't really know much about the entire country, but I did know that the Har HaBayit, that the center of the universe is right here in my backyard. And I figured, like, well, if I'm going to be in Israel, I might as well be like where the action is. You know, where else would I want to be? And
What's Har HaBayit for people who don't know?
it's the Har HaBayit,
It's the holiest place,
the center of the universe. It's the most contested place in the world. It's it's the cause of many unfortunate difficulties, as well as the place where tradition, where the Medrash and the holy books will explain that that it's over here where Avram Avinu actually took his son Isaac and offered him there as a sacrifice. Now that's right. It's like I could throw a rock and I could hit it. And also for Christians, the Via Dolorosa, and and where Jesus actually, they say where he walked and where he, where he ate and where he studied, etc., is also, it's right here. So, I mean, I love I love all that. It's huge.
Do you kind of like pinch yourself sometimes when you?
Yes.
I mean, you live in the old city. I mean, that is incredible.
Yes, and yes.
Even for me, when I came, I was just like pretty blown away by how. And there is something very special about Jerusalem that it's just funny living in Tel Aviv. It's a 45-minute drive, but when you come to Jerusalem, it's just on a different level. It's a different country. To me, it's a different vibe, but especially where you are, especially even when we came over and just walking to the car when we didn't walk to the car and walking out of your house. It's I hate to sound cliche, but the spirituality, the feeling of, you really feel something special when you're there.
We have friends that live down the block here who have devoted their entire lives to making sure, when any which way they can, and big investments and big donors, etc., that the young people of Israel, especially those that maybe have come to Jerusalem once or twice in their life, really appreciate and understand what it is that this is all about. And they have, oh boy, maybe several hundred guests in their home every week, especially soldiers, and they bus people in to come to this beautiful, beautiful home, to be able to get a firsthand look. These people, their house stands above the wall, the western wall, and the Har HaBayit, and so they get a real sense that wow, there are people here, there are homes here, there are people that have devoted their entire lives to making sure that, as you just said a minute ago, it's like, you grew up here, and how many times have you come to Jerusalem, and how important was it really in your day to day, and all the kids and all the people and the rest that you grew up with, probably not very high on the list of what's important about being in this country. And so, we are incredibly privileged to be part of that effort. My wife always says we are the, honey, how do you say it again? She says we are at the threshold, not saying it right, of Kaya.
Where's your wife when you need her?
Yeah, she always likes to say, for instance, like, every now and then, it's been a while, but I open up a Facebook and I would see a buddy of mine who's Elton John's keyboard player, and he posts, he says, "Oh, we're going to Israel." So I send him a note and I say, "Hey, Kim, it's Ronnie. Remember?" "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah." I said, "I'm in Jerusalem." Anyway, he comes with Elton, not with Elton, but he comes with the rest of the band, and we're the ambassadors to how does she say it? We're the ambassadors to the old city for, people that come through. People that, unfortunately read the New York Times. I know you don't want to get into we're not going to get too political here, but
Oh, wait, time out. Who says that I don't want to get political?
well, the New York Times is an Israeli bashing newspaper.
It's true, pretty much.
Well, which is why your buddy Barry Weiss, I think, finally got out of there.
Mhm.
Thank you for turning our podcast on to me, because I love it.
Well, I will reach out to her and I will tell her, maybe she'll listen to this. But
Wow.
she is amazing. She's
Well,
I've never met
I
her.
didn't know you know her.
I know I don't know her, but I can reach out to her. I know how to reach out to her, but I just think that
She just had Ken Burns on. That's our newest guest.
the filmmaker.
Yes.
Wow.
His most recent documentary is on the Holocaust, and he opened up, stuff that you'd think you'd seen it all, you haven't. And
Anyway, New York Times, you were saying.
people will come through here. We've had different quote unquote rock stars come through here who, because of what watching CNN and reading the New York Times, they were ready for the worst. And we go and we do everything that we can to make sure that they see really what's happening here and really understand the love and the effort that the Israelis and that we have made in trying to make something work with our cousins. And luckily, I think that most of them, by the time they leave, they have they have a whole other perspective on what Eretz Yisrael is than they had before they got here.
You started talking about this, which is MyPart. You started talking about Matan. You started talking about this company. But what is MyPart? What's MyPart doing?
Oh, it's been almost 5 years, and it has gone through it's gone through changes over the years in terms of what it maybe was supposed to be until what it is right now and what is the ultimate goal.
Sounds like a startup.
Yeah, but Matan, who is a graduate of the Shmoni Matayim, the 8200 unit of the intelligence unit of the IDF.
Which, by the way, I need to say,
Yeah,
the talent, the brains, and the know-how that come out of 8200, some of the people who have come out of that unit have gone on to create incredible companies that succeed around the world in changing the way human beings live, pretty much. So, yeah. So he's a graduate of a very prestigious unit.
and at the same time that he has such skills as a technician, he's also a musician, which is extraordinary. It's sort of, I think they say left brain, right brain, and he has all he's got all these skills. And the way that he tells the story is that part of what he was assigned to do, he's still in Miloim, and he still serves like once a month or once every couple of months. But one of the things that he was tasked to do was pretty much, as he would say, find bad guys, through technology, where they would say, "Oh, we must look over here," and we think there's something going on over there, and they were able to narrow down where there was heat, they were supposed to look, and it worked, and it worked. Instead of spending so much time and energy, looking everywhere, the technology took and helped direct and eliminate so much wasted time looking in the wrong areas. And with that, he says that he was able to take some of this technology that he developed and use it towards helping music executives to spend their time on 10% of the music that they have received, as opposed to listening to everything that they've received. In other words, the technology says, oh, you're looking for a song like Let It Be? Okay, so out of these 10,000 songs that you have here, you should listen to these 10. Now, what do you mean these 10? There's 10,000 songs. Yeah, you could listen to as many as you want, but the technology is telling you to just listen to these 10. And it's an extraordinary, extraordinary toy that has now been adopted by companies like Hypnosis, who are some of the biggest music publishers in the world. MPL, which is Paul McCartney's music publishing company, is currently a customer. Several divisions at Universal Israel, Universal Australia, and several divisions at Universal in the UK are now our customers. And it's a process and it's a struggle, but we're building it.
Well, let me ask you a question. So these 10 songs, like, who is listening to them? Who's going to benefit from it? And why should they listen to these 10 songs? Like, who's it helping and why?
Oh, so if in the case like you're one of our customers, like Hypnosis. So what we do is we ingest their entire catalog into the AI, which in the case of Hypnosis is about 70,000 songs. So now all of their songs have been what we call crunched, and you, as a music publisher, get requests every day, many requests every day saying, we need a song like this for this movie. We need a song for this, like this for this artist. We need a song for a commercial. And they tell you exactly what they need. And so when you can take the song that they said they wish they had, in this particular case, I'll just use an example, Let It Be. I wish I had a song like Let It Be, but obviously to license Let It Be from the Beatles is about $6 or $7 million, and I only have 50 grand. So help me find something. So we take Let It Be, or now that you're Hypnosis and you're our customer, you have now learned how to use the platform. You take Let It Be, you put it through the machine, and then the machine says, okay, listen to these 10 songs and see if the results work for you.
Does it serve musicians and writers? It does, in the sense that they, of course, can find people to use their songs. But what about in the creation of songs? Does it help?
It's a really good question. We have been approached by several companies, which Matan is not really want to do, but we have been approached by several people who are concerned with infringement of copyrights. So they say, can your, AI help us detect those, people that have infringed, and the answer is, yeah, we can really do that, but we don't want to really be known as that. We have taken on a couple of projects this way, but way under the radar without telling anybody we've done it.
Got it. Phenomenal.
I wish I could tell you that there have been some, we're just really getting started with these big shot clients. So soon I hope to be able to tell you about some matches that we've made, actually, where they say, oh, well, we used it and we took in Let It Be and they wanted Let It Be. And it popped out this, Dave Stewart song or this, this Ed Sheeran song. And we submitted it to the client and boom, they took it.
Wow. Success.
Yeah, that hasn't happened today. But we have a lot of great early believers.
Yeah, look, it doesn't happen that often to me that I approach someone. It really doesn't happen a lot. But like when I heard Matan speak at that conference, I did approach him, and I think that you guys are doing phenomenal stuff. So I wanted to talk about it a little bit. Before we go, I'm going to ask you one more question, and it's really about you. And if someone who doesn't know you, you have a superpower, something that you're really, really good at. What would that be?
Well, empathy. I think I could try to really feel the other person or feel the music that someone wants me to listen to or feel the book somebody wants me to read or yeah, I think which is amazing to me because I see my son. I don't know what yes, maybe he got something from but I see that that's who he is with little people. Because he teaches kids to play basketball. He's an incredible athlete, and I see how he really communicates with small people, and because I've been blessed with so much that I have to, just constantly remind myself that you can't a karata tov, yeah, just have to have a karata tov for the Kaddish Baruch Hu. It's just like here, take this wife. Here, take this kid. Here, take this career. Here, take this. Here, it's like, what did I do to get all this stuff?
Well, I can see why he's given it. Thank you for just chit-chatting with me on like that. Really appreciate it. And I love you. You're great.
Good night, sweetie. See you soon. Good night.
Well, that's it. Thank you for joining me on I'm That. I hope you enjoyed the chat, and I hope you'll join me for our next guest. In the meantime, definitely hit subscribe, whether you're on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, or any other platform. And if you can, leave a comment, give it a like, and tell your friends. That would be brilliant. Stay tuned for the next show, and see you soon.